Hello and welcome to Alpha News Studio. I'm Kara Main and my guest today is a prominent journalist, candidate for US Senate, Christina Pascucci.
Thank you for having me.
Hi Christina, thank you so much for coming.
Yes, it's my pleasure and honor.
You're running for US Senate. Why now? And what changes do you hope to see after you win?
Okay. Everything. We live in the state that has the greatest potential. California is amazing. America as a country has so much potential, but we're falling short. And I believe it is time to have a new kind of leadership, someone who exudes human decency, who's willing to reach across the aisle and collaborate to get meaningful legislation done rather than arguing all the time and going back and forth. The world is watching, and I think they're losing respect for America with how we're dealing with a lot of these huge issues we see that impact the entire world. The reason I'm running now is because I've been in the trenches for nearly 20 years in war zones around the world, interviewing thousands of people from former presidents to the Dalai Lama to people who are in Armenia who are dealing with the assault by Azerbaijan. And I've seen that people's needs aren't being met. Especially in this state. And the people who I'm running against, I don't have faith that they'll be able to deliver what we need in order to get on the right track.
Can you talk specifically about some of the changes that you're hoping to see?
Absolutely. So I'm very passionate about fighting crime, about addressing homelessness, the border crisis, all of these things we see at home. I'm very pro-business. So making it easier for smaller businesses to thrive and survive. And then also when it comes to international issues, since I know your audience is more internationally focused in a sense, I think it's important to support democracy across the board. So when we saw what happened in Artskah, for example, it seemed like a lot of the world and American lawmakers didn't shine the light on it that they could have. And if we're going to support democracy with the war in Ukraine, we need to support democracy in Armenia too.
You were among very few journalists covering what was going on in Artsakh. Did you meet any resistance from the big media in your work regarding that topic?
I think as time went on, it was harder to cover it continually, but that's why you have to fight for it, and that's why representation matters. You know, I'm not Armenian, obviously, but knowing and having Armenian allies within news media who I could collaborate with to get these stories on. When I was most recently at Fox 11, I worked a lot with Artskah, who I know you've had here, and we kind of tag teamed this together to make sure that we got the word out and that the message was heard, because too much was at stake. It was important. And part of the reason I cared so much and had that perspective of just, you know, covering different conflicts and humanitarian crises is because I had worked as a humanitarian around the world. I worked as, I was on the board of this organization where we would go into conflict areas or war zones and work with children of war and give them life-saving medical care. Now we're expanding to give them food and a good quality education, things that basically meet their basic needs. And so seeing all those things firsthand and then hearing what was unfolding in Armenia, I couldn't turn a blind eye. And so having people in the media who have that perspective and also the representation that I mentioned is crucially important.
This is why I honestly believe we must have more women in politics because of the motherly instinct, whatever it is, I don't know. But women just, I feel like they care more. I'm sorry to say that, but I honestly feel like, you know, women do care more.
Yeah, I understand what you mean there, and I think it's a definitely different type of leadership that's a little bit more compassion-driven and collaborative. And that is also critically important.
Yes.
Especially now.
Absolutely. Do you think the United States was complicit in the genocide in Artsakh?
I don't think that lawmakers did enough, including the ones who represent this area. The second largest Armenian diaspora in the world is here in Los Angeles, as you know. And the representative who repped that area, who I'm running against, who's my opponent now, he put out some statements as this genocide was unfolding, but there was no real action taken. I actually went there and I saw things firsthand, and I did everything I could to shine a light on it and tell multiple stories around it and interview Armenians whose homes had been bombed, who had lost everything. And, you know, telling those stories was so important. But the work continued, and all I saw from lawmakers here were statements that I don't think Azerbaijan even saw those statements. They needed to be more actionable in reaching out to the leaders of Azerbaijan to actually affect change or stop what was unfolding. And it's really sad to see what ended up happening. I do think that the US could have done a lot more.
When you went to Armenia in September of 2022, what did you see?
Well, I went to Sok and Jermuk, and I remember speaking to this elderly woman who, her home was uninhabitable. It had been bombed and shelled, and she was outside trying to make some food, and the living conditions were awful, and her family said that they had had to sleep in their car, and it was just very painful to see the plight of people who are just trying to live peacefully. When I went to Jermuk, it's normally a bustling, amazing, vibrant tourist town. It's so beautiful. And it was a ghost town. There was no one there. There was this huge hotel and just one car in the parking lot, which was security. People, you know, children and women had fled, and then some men were left behind, but largely it was completely abandoned. And you could just feel the pain, and it was like a piece of the soul had died in that moment. But I know Armenians are so strong and resilient, so they continue to fight, and I'm very amazed by their spirit.
The Armenian community is very grateful for your unbiased covering of what was going on in Artsakh. And it's fair to say that you are a champion of the Armenian cause. Would that be center for your work as a senator?
What, championing the Armenian cause? Of course. I think it's very important. And when I was in Yerevan, I was speaking to someone within the military and different officials within the government. And one thing that came up is they said, if the US doesn't support us in this moment, why do we want to move toward a democracy if the world is staying silent? And so, again, I think it's important for us to be consistent in our approach to foreign policy, where we're always, you know, if we say we uphold democracy, being consistent in that around the world, not picking and choosing which battles we will uphold that ideal in.
Yeah. For example, Ukraine, right, is a good example of that. Selective advocacy, that would be a good word for it.
Right, yeah, and I know that's how a lot of the Armenian people felt, and I understood that feeling.
Thank you. You're running against very seasoned politicians. Adam Schiff is one of them. What do you think your advantage is? They're very seasoned, they have big budgets, right? Which a new candidate doesn't necessarily have, right? What's your advantage?
Okay, where to start? So one thing is, when you mention Schiff specifically, look at what happened with Armenia. I actually went there. I spoke to the people of Armenia. I shined a light on it. He wrote a statement that Azerbaijan never saw. I don't think there was any real outreach to the government of Azerbaijan. And so I'm about action and about humanizing people. And I care deeply about people. That's why I'm doing this. I've spent nearly 20 years investigating, uncovering corruption, changing policy, speaking to thousands of people across the state one-on-one in very intimate moments where you're hearing about their biggest struggles and worries. And so, you know, a lot of our establishment politicians, sure, they talk to people on the campaign trail or whatever, but it's not the same depth. And so I have that advantage. I also think that people are sick of political BS, if I can say that. You know, they want someone new, they want someone who's going to speak the truth, and they want someone who's truly going to represent them. And so my opponents have been in office for nearly 60 years between the three main opponents that I have. And I think when people look around, they don't like what they see in our current state of affairs in California and across the country. And lastly, something that really sets me apart is my ability to speak the language of those I disagree with and to build consensus. That's such an important piece at this part in our history, because if we don't work toward building consensus with lawmakers across the aisle, we're going to lose our democracy. And the world is watching. And my why, I have so much conviction in my why that I'm doing this, which is I'm 6 months pregnant, I'm fighting for the future of my daughter and for her generation. I want our kids to have a better world than how we found it, and right now we're failing them.
That is such a huge why, honestly. Speaking of which, running for an office is hard. Being pregnant is hard.
Yes.
So you do both.
It is so hard.
How? Are you superhuman? How do you do both?
No, I think working women do it every day. I'm just another working woman trying to fight the good fight. And there's no greater passion that I think we have as humans than our children. And so because I feel so strongly about wanting to create a different future for her, I'm laser focused, and I can work through the nausea, I can work through any of the symptoms I've had. Luckily, it's been relatively easy. Knock on wood, but you know, it hasn't been too painful of a pregnancy compared to what some of my friends have dealt with.
Yeah. Still, it's really, really hard. So kudos to you, Christina, for doing all of that. If there was one thing I need to know about the beautiful woman sitting in front of me, what that would be. Was there an event in your life that shaped you as a woman, as a future politician, as a future mom? Yeah,
I think a big part of what shaped me was early on as a child. I had a family member who had a lot of mental health struggles and substance abuse issues. And we all in our family, so many of us are touched by this one way or another, whether it's a family member or a good friend. But she taught me, I was about 10 years old when I had a very traumatic experience as a result of her addiction and some of the things she was going through. And I learned good people do bad things. And what led her down that path? What if she had had early intervention? And it made me feel like we can do so much to support our people, and it's important because it impacts all of us. So that took me on a journey to be a journalist because I wanted to tell people stories. I wanted to build compassion and understanding for what people are going through, and also what we can do to support and address those systematic issues that we face. Mental health is one of the biggest challenges that California faces, and it's a world problem. And it's getting worse with social media and misinformation and the dehumanization of one another. So I think it was really important to tell those stories. And then as I was able to be a journalist and tell those stories, I realized the need for action, and that's why I'm taking action now in this way.
Yeah. That's an important word that you mentioned, dehumanization. You use that word a lot in the current situation between Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
You vouch for people seeing everyone as a human being rather than a certain religion or nationality. Yeah,
and I think if you were to have a Jew and a Muslim sit down and talk, I mean, they're brothers or sisters. There's so much more that unites them than divides them. Obviously, in this environment, it's so tense, and it creates a much different environment. But at the end of the day, I think when two people sit down and they unite on their humanity. I mean, I've been to more than 100 countries across 7 continents, and lived with native tribes, and I mean, no matter who the human is, when you're sitting across from a human, you can find something to unite on. I remember I was on this trip to Borneo, and I was with this tribe that didn't speak any English, but I offered them a peanut. And we just started laughing, and you just sit there and you're present in your humanity, and that gets lost in so many of the issues today, including the tragedy that's been unfolding in Israel and Gaza.
What woman in history, living or not, is your biggest inspiration?
Oh my goodness. I'm sure if I was able to really sit on this and think about it, I could have an answer of so many, but the one that comes to mind is my mom, because she has gone through so much, And she came to this country as an immigrant, and she was a single mom. And to think of everything that she went through, not speaking the language, that must have been so daunting. And she was in her early 20s. I mean, I could barely get my 2 shoes on in my early 20s, let alone be a single mom in a new country and,
without language.
Yeah, not speaking the language. And she figured out how to work multiple jobs and create a life for her kids. And I'm just amazed by her level of strength.
I call this question evolution of a dream. Could you tell us, what did you dream about when you were a little girl? What are you dreaming of right now? And what do you think you're going to dream about in 10 years' time?
Whoa, what a big question.
It is.
So I think as a young girl, starting with the story I told you about my family member who was dealing with so much, I was always so curious about people, and I wanted their stories to be out. I wanted them to feel seen and heard and like they mattered. And that has continued to evolve and magnify throughout my career. I think it's more important than ever for people to feel seen and heard, because when they don't, that's when you have a lot of the rise of mental health issues and all these problems, so many of the problems that we see today. So yeah, I think continuing on a larger scale to make sure that people's needs are met and they feel seen and they feel heard, especially by their elected leaders who are elected to serve them and not to satisfy their own special interests that we see in Washington today with so many electeds. I would like to really, in my wildest dreams, revolutionize the way that government serves its people in the sense that it actually works for its people, and that people who live in California, who are American, they feel like life is getting better, not harder, like they see right now.
And in 10 years?
In 10 years, President of the United States. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, seriously?
No, I'm just...
Imagine.
No. What about you? What are you going to be in 10 years?
I have no idea. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow.
I know. No, hopefully I will have raised a citizen of the world who is a good person and is making the world better in her own way.
Right. But don't rule out the presidency. Nobody knows, right? Why not?
Who will our first woman president be?
We need one. We really need one. So why not you, right?
Why not? Why not you?
I wasn't born here, so.
Oh yeah, there's that one little detail.
Yeah, right. Constitution. What would you tell our viewers?
I think more of the same of what I said is that I want you to feel seen and heard, and I will magnify your voice. Truly. I want it to be an open, collaborative, I want to be in the communities, not only in Washington, where typically U.S. senators, they'll spend most of their time there. I want to be back here in the communities, talking directly to the people, seeing what I can do to make life a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Christina. You're a force to reckon with, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Today, my guest was candidate for U.S. Senate and journalist Christina Pascucci. I'll see you next time.